Hi. The Bicentennial celebration of Karl Heinrich Ulrichs means that it's 200 years of pride in 2025. Karl Heinrich Ulrichs is the first known person to claim publicly that gay life was moral, innocent, and healthy. He identified himself and gay folk as a class, even calculating that there was at least one gay person in 500. He thought the faction large enough to come out and demand its denied civil rights. His was a brand new way of thinking. With his pen and his voice, he courageously addressed homophobia in the church, state, and social and medical establishments. Fed up with the persecution, prosecution, and suicide of gays, Ulrichs came out to his kinsfolk in 1862. The 37-year-old told them he had decided to dedicate his life defending the inalienable rights of gays, lesbians, bisexual, and trans folk. The Prussians banned his books, and as a member of the opposition, threw him in jail soon after. When the potent German anti-gay law, paragraph 175, became firmly established in the late 1870s and remained until 1969, Ulrichs gave up and exiled himself to the more liberal Italy and became a respected Latinist. Ulrichs believed the Latin language was a uniting force. Even so, after his death in 1895, Ulrichs' contributions were in danger of facing oblivion. Suicides also motivated Magnus Hirschfeld, who in the late 1890s took up the task of reviving Ulrichs' legacy. Hirschfeld published an edition of Ulrichs' works at the time and again in 1925 as a commemoration. He dedicated to Ulrichs a significant chapter in his monumental book, The Homosexuality of Men and Women, the first encyclopedia on the subject. Hirschfeld had gone to Italy to inquire about Ulrichs and related what Marquis Niccolo Persichetti, a patron of Ulrichs, had told him. After a fire left Ulrichs homeless, the Marquis put him up in his home. Persichetti also rescued the exile and pauper, as it says on his gravestone, from being buried in a common grave. Persichetti published a magnificent eulogy for Ulrichs in 1896. British authors, such as John Addington Symonds, who had visited Ulrichs in Italy in 1891, and Edward Carpenter, wrote about Ulrichs. All this conspired to keep Ulrichs free from obscurity. Then came the Nazis. The fascists shut down the thriving gay movement in Germany and publicly burned its books in the early 1930s. Gays went underground, taking the memory of Ulrichs and his literary remains with them. In 1949, Hans Giese, a German physician and sexologist, tackled the job of rebuilding what Hirschfeld had established, an institute of sex research and a scientific humanitarian committee. At the same time, a homophile movement began to emerge in the United States. Henry Gerber had been a soldier in Germany. In 1924, he established the first known gay organization. It did not take off, but Gerber did translate some of Hirschfeld's work and introduced the early German movement to Americans. In 1949, W. Dore Legg went to Germany and in the early 1950s established one Institute of Homophile Studies in Los Angeles, California, with Jim Kepner and Don Slater as co-founders. They knew about the German movement and Ulrichs. They called for translations of the early German works on homosexuality. In the United States, the 1960s saw the beginnings of a homosexual movement, and the 1970s ushered in a gay movement, which in turn, to a certain extent, reintroduced Ulrichs to the Germans. The events of June 1969 in New York at the Stonewall Inn in part caused the rescue of Ulrichs from obscurity. That was almost 50 years ago. An assessment is in order of the contributions made to the knowledge of Ulrich's life and works since the early 1970s. The results of the Stonewall riots in 1969 ignited a flurry of academic interest in Ulrichs. Before Stonewall, regard for the German language waned because of two world wars with Germany. Also, academics would not touch the subject of homosexuality for fear of being tagged a homosexual by association. Add to that the fact that translations were not counted in the academic world of publish or perish. After Stonewall, academics did pick up the subject. In the 1970s, Hubert Kennedy, Jim Stakely, and Jonathan Katz are of great importance in the early revival of Ulrich's contributions. In the same decade, Vern Below, who founded the Gay Caucus of the American Civil Liberties Union, pointed to the treasure trove that was the abundant gay early German writings on homosexuality, especially those by Ulrichs. Paul Nash and I went to Germany in 1975 and attended gay organizations. I was a student at the University of California at Los Angeles. When I returned a year later, I looked up the German volumes on homosexuality at the University Research Library. Tucked away among the tomes was a thin volume with university covers, meaning it was an older book. It happened to be an original book by Ulrichs. Paul was fascinated by the book and asked me to translate it. I went to Dora Legg at One Institute, to Jim Kepner at the Gay Archives, and to Don Slater at the Homosexual Information Center, and inquired about Ulrichs. They assured me that Ulrichs was a major figure and that they welcomed translations. Out of the blue, Jonathan Katz sent me his 1975 reprint of the Hirschfeld edition of Ulrich's work. Since I wanted a set of unedited originals, I sent out a call for them. Eckhart Prince kindly responded. The translation of Ulrich's research on the riddle of man-manly love was published, thanks to Paul's wish to have it in his own language, and to Vern Below, who wanted Ulrich's work to see the light of English. In the 1980s, influenced by Kennedy's biography of Ulrichs and by my translations of Ulrichs, Massimo Consoli, a founder of the Italian gay movement, went to L'Aquila, Italy, to find Ulrich's grave. He organized an annual pilgrimage to Ulrich's resting place on the Sunday closest to Ulrich's birthday. Massimo, in turn, used my English translations of Ulrichs to turn some of them into Italian. Likewise, Lyman Hardy translated some of Ulrich's works into French and Spanish. In 1997, Wolfram Zetz and others completed the work of having a square in Munich named after Ulrichs. Zetz also reprinted and edited many of Ulrich's works. Zetz was also responsible for numerous other authors writing and publishing works on Ulrichs. Inspired by Zetz, more streets in Germany were named after Ulrichs in Hanover, Bremen, Aurich, Stuttgart, Berlin, Frankfurt, and in Aquila, Italy. Plaques honoring Ulrichs appeared on buildings in Göttingen, Burgdorf, near Hanover, and Hildesheim. Ulrich's gravestone, a magnificent piece of marble inscribed in Latin from head to foot, has been beautifully restored. Even Ulrich's image is appearing on book covers. Case studies is interdisciplinary. Since Ulrichs has become better known in the last 50 years, researchers have begun to analyze Ulrich's legacy. Before, writers were focused on Ulrich's biography and his place in history. Now, scholars are looking into his medical sources and the origins of bisexuality and of sexology in general. Another took Ulrich's correspondence and showed the development of Ulrich's third sex theory. Others could approach the religious aspects in Ulrich's writings or his references to the ancient Greeks and Romans. Still others have worked on Ulrichs as a revivalist of the Latin language. Ulrichs tackled all the disciplines: family, society, history, language and literature, biology and anthropology. Karl Heinrich Ulrichs ought to be celebrated regally on the 200th anniversary of his birth on August 28, 2025. He courageously gave his all to gay folks. He is owed a debt of gratitude for his highly intelligent and new approach to making life better for all who came after him. Thank you.